or you can email us with anything you want. Literally anything. I will read anything. I am open to ideas and suggestions. That you can get in touch
To
with
do
us
with
for
film, clearly.
podcast.
To do with the film file. Nothing else.
Oh no, just send me anything. I'm happy.
You're opening up basically the book in Evil Dead now into your life. You do know that.
Klaatu, Barada,
Stop
Nick. You can do that. Podcast at filmfile.uk.
Okay.
No, UK.
Okay. Leave that in. I like that. All right. So, if you're a regular follower of the Film File, then you know that every week we do a deep dive into films that, well, we just want to talk about in depth and explore. And apparently, we seem to have a thing for John Carpenter, as a lot of the films we have done in our deep dive have been John Carpenter films. And that's because of not only because of our love of John Carpenter films, but they're great films to have those deep dives on, really. We did The Thing. We did Assault on Precinct 13. We
covered Starman when it was my films that I'd missed.
So many. So now we are probably talking about one of the more famous and recognizable John Carpenter films. It even has his name in the title, Escape from New York, which is stylized on screen as John Carpenter's Escape from New York.
Insert trailer.
This film came out in 1981. We mentioned it a couple of weeks ago as it was its anniversary. It's a kind of a science fiction film. It's definitely an action film. Co-written, co-scored, and directed by Carpenter himself, and starred Kurt Russell, not at the beginning, just as a film fact, of the beginning of their working relationship, but what made Kurt Russell into the leading man I believe he is today. Film also starred Lee Van Cleef, Donald Pleasance, Ernest Borgnine, Isaac Hayes, John Carpenter's then wife Adriana Barbeau, and Harry Dean Stanton. The film's story is set in the near future world of 1997. And I love, I'll just put a caveat there. I love when you look back at old science fiction films and they look at things like the 90s or even 2001 for that matter. But anyway, it concerns a crime-ridden United States which has converted Manhattan Island, which at that point in history was probably crime-ridden, into the country's maximum security prison. While Air Force One is hijacked by insurgents and is deliberately crashed into New York City, ex-soldier, federal prisoner, and thief Snake Plissken, played by Kurt Russell, at his Clint Eastwoody best, is given just 24 hours to go in, rescue the president, and save the world. So my memories of it are seeing it on the big screen, and I took my kid sister to see it at the time. And I've loved Escape from New York ever. And I've loved Escape from New York ever since. Yes, it does look a bit hokey these days, the way that computer effects are, the fact it's set in 1997. But you know what? Kurt Russell's portrayal of Snake Plissken is one of the definitive leading man performances. And I always think of Kurt Russell as this character. The eye patch, the Clint Eastwood impression, the way that he's just so darn cool. The rest of the film inspired a whole slew of very low budget Z movies that were dystopian futures, but Snake Plissken and Escape from New York still stand out today. There's been many attempts to reboot it. There was a sequel, which we'll mention a little bit later, but I have such a good time with that. Is it a perfect film, Escape from New York? No, it isn't. It's just darn good fun. Andy, anything you want to say other than what I've said about Escape from New York?
It's a perfectly entertaining film, let's be honest. This was an early VHS viewing for me and my friends in our early teens back home. And I, when I first watched it, it was the kick-ass moments of the film and Snake Plissken himself who drew me in. What a great presence! What a great anti-hero character, and some fun action moments. But this is also another one of Carpenter's films, and you get this a lot with Carpenter's films, that your initial impression as you get older and watch it through the years, you start to see the other levels that the film has, and the dark satire, the poking a twisted eye at social issues through the lens of sci-fi environs that it inhabits, is something that Carpenter did so perfectly. Uh, the character of Snake Plissken, the cynical anti-authority growling out his dialogue as though he's in a Sergei Leone film, a criminal past that should make him a villain, but you love him, you root for him, and you want him to succeed in basically getting a bomb taken out of his neck at the end of it. It's you mentioned briefly that it looks dated and it looks a bit wonky. Some of the computer effects look a bit off. I watched it last night and I've got the 4K UHD version, and I think it still looks quite sumptuous. Yes, you can tell where the sets are and what isn't a real location. Yes, you can see some of the effects work is a bit just close to the edge, but it still has the impact. The CGI effects, the cityscape computerized look, wasn't even CGI. And this was something that I only discovered a few years ago, that it was literally just an actual model that he painted reflective
Really, I didn't
paint
know
around
that.
the edges and then shone a black light on it. Yeah, to give it a computerized view screen kind of look, because they didn't have that CGI technology then to make it. So when you look at it like that, the CGI effects seem a lot better because it wasn't CGI. There's so much to love about this film, and there's so much backstory to it that it's worth getting hold of any documentaries about the making of this film, because the character Snake Plissken, it wasn't necessarily a John Carpenter creation. He had the idea for him, but Kurt Russell created that character, which is why you can't picture someone else in that role, because he had so much input into everything from the eye patch to the gruffness to even the throwaway lines of dialogue like, I thought you were dead, which evolved on the next film into something completely different. Everything came from the collaboration between Russell and Carpenter, which we've seen on other films that they worked on, that they worked together so well that it's no coincidence that their best films have them both
Well,
connected to them.
that's right.
I love
Sorry, carry on.
I love Escape from New York. I have to just go on a side note here and just say, when I put it on last night, my wife was sat in the room, just saw that I was putting on a film. She went, "Oh, what's this?" as the titles are playing up. And she's like, "Is this an old film?" It's like, "Well, it's the 80s. I'm rather against you calling this an old film." And then as it started up, she's like, "Is this Snakes on a Plane?" And I was like, "You're close. You're close." She's like, "Oh, it's Escape from New York." I was like, "Yeah, Snake Plissken, Escape from New York." So you were on the right lines. And then she just went, "I'm off to bed then." I was just like, and at that moment, I realized that this is a film that I love because it appeals to everything boyish. It's a pure boyish film. And I've had this throughout my life, that I can't seem to get any females that I know to work out what is so interesting about this character and this film. It is a laddish
Yeah, my
film.
other half wouldn't get this. He wouldn't entertain this at all. So to give it a bit of depth into the film, you've got to remember back in the late 70s, post Watergate, America was in a very, very different place. My first trip to New York was in the early 80s, and it isn't the New York. It isn't the gleaming edifice that it is now, the big entertainment center of the world. New York was crumbling, and there was that feeling of cynicism that was running through the nation. And Carpenter picked up on that, and he picked up on things like Death Wish, which were hugely popular and hugely relevant at that part of the 70s when he and Nick Castle started working on the script. While he didn't believe in the philosophy behind Death Wish, the sense of New York being a jungle, he wanted to make a science fiction version of that. It's a very, very low budget film with financing coming from different ways, including the British production company and distribution company at the time, Goldcrest, which is sadly gone. The producers wanted Charles Bronson or even Tommy Lee Jones, but ended up with Kurt Russell. And as you said, had a great influence on the definition of the character and the way that the character went. Kurt Russell at that time was still trying to overcome the lightweight screen image he'd had because he'd come through the Disney comedies. Most people forget about Kurt Russell having started that, unless, of course, you see him in Christmas Chronicles, where it almost goes back to it. So it's a big leap forward for Kurt Russell as an actor and as a leading man into the leading man that we know today. And also the fact that he'd worked with Carpenter on their Elvis Presley movie, which was made for TV and not seen by a great many people, but it helped cement their relationship. The film went on to do relatively okay at the box office. There'd always been talk of a sequel. There were many that had been written, pitched, but it took some time before Escape from New York ended up with a sequel. And that happened with Escape from LA. Now, that reunited Carpenter and it reunited Kurt Russell in a film that is almost a remake of Escape from New York and doesn't quite work. This time, the sense of having a low budget doesn't pay off and doesn't add anything to the film. And while I still have some love for it, it certainly isn't the sequel that we deserve to Escape from New York.
Yeah.
Do you agree on that? Is that something that you feel with Escape from LA?
Yeah, the sequel, which came in 1996, whereas the first film, like you say, you drew upon the inspiration of like the distrust of the government after the Watergate scandal. This one was a reaction to the LA riots at the time and how LA had kind of got turned into a crisis area. And the US, in this point of view, is a totalitarian and Christian land. And after an earthquake had split LA away from the mainland, it became a new walled off island for people who breach the moral code of Christian America, who drink, smoke, take drugs, red meat, atheism, promiscuous activity. All those folk are deported there. And it tried to play a satire on the Hollywood aspect and, how eccentric the Hollywood life can be with plastic surgeries, etc. But it doesn't quite work. And you could argue that the first film, Escape from New York, was very episodic, that it was just like Snake Plissken going from location to location to location, adventure, questing. This felt more episodic. It felt like a series of skits cobbled together. However, I've got some love for it. And that love purely is because Kurt Russell throws everything into it again. And there's something about the character of Snake Plissken that you could watch him making a cup of tea and being engaged and intrigued. He's just delivers all the way through, even though the rest of the film around him feels wonky. He's still mesmerizing on screen and he's still got that presence. And especially like with this film, he goes to long black trench coat and defined like camouflage pants and black top. And it's like guns that he carries with him have you straight away going, oh, he looks cool. It's a great character. And like I said earlier, on the first film, it was like, I thought you're dead. I'd heard you died. With this one, it was like, I thought you were taller. And I love the fact that they've got these little running jokes. There's something about the Snake Plissken character that makes even an average film like Escape from LA, and everyone who loves Escape from New York admits that Escape from LA is underwhelming, but we still want another film. And fans of Snake Plissken just want to see Snake Plissken brought back to any setting. Escape from Bognor Regis, I'd be happy with anything.
I mean, there has been plenty of talk of a third one. There was even Escape from Space mentioned at one point. There was a kind of a remake from what was the name of that? Lockdown. Was it Lockdown? The one that John Carpenter ended up suing. It was a French film with...
Yes.
It was Lockdown. There was even a kind of a remake rip-off called Lockdown where John Carpenter, in fact, sued because he said the film was too much like Snake Plissken, and to be honest, it was. There's been many, many talks of Russell and Carpenter reuniting, even though I think both of them are getting on a bit and don't know how they would do it. And of course, there has been a remake being mentioned probably since the early 2000s. At one point, Robert Rodriguez was connected with it. Neil Cross, who's the creator of Luther, had written a script. And now it seems to be over with Lee Whannell, who did The Invisible Man, redeveloping it. Gerard Butler was mentioned to be playing Snake. I'd rather have my memories of Kurt Russell playing it unless they do something very, very clever with the entire Escape from New York storyline. And there's still
Yeah.
room to explore that world. But for me, Snake Plissken will always be Kurt Russell. If you've not had a chance to see it, get a chance to see it because it is a proper film geek of a movie. And apparently later this year, there's a new publication of a new book about the making of the film, Escape from New York, the official story of the film, to be published in September of this year by Titan Books. So I'll add that to my Christmas list already.